Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for another week bringing us together, Lord. Pray that tonight would be especially impactful for each one of us here, Lord. Help us to clear our minds of all distractions and things that would cause us to be less than focused entirely upon what your word has for each of us this evening, Lord. Help us to be attentive and receptive to the words of your servants and your people from so long ago. And God, to the urgings of your spirit as you seek to work in each of our lives and mold us into the individuals that you want us to be. Thank you, Father. And we thank you for all that you're going to do tonight. We pray this in your name. Amen. All right. So, real quick review, where were we at? What's been going on in the book of Nehemiah? I know it's been a few weeks, so I figure it's probably not a bad thing to have a refresher. Yeah. Yeah, the people of Israel, the remnant, as they're called, the children of the exile, are hanging out in Jerusalem, and Ezra the scribe comes out with the book of the lost arts reading, and the people are overwhelmed with conviction, and they start to cry, and the people are like, no, 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 don't cry, don't cry, this is a holy day to the Lord. So they rejoice in the fact that they are returning to the relationship, you know between God and his people. We had the whole thing with the Festival of Booths. There's a Festival of Tabernacles, and there's this awesome, national move to participate in this festival that hasn't taken place since back during the time of Joshua. And so you can see God moving in His people and really urging them, the people are are in the last chapter especially are convicted and they repent of their sin, and Ezra goes through and talks about their past and how Israel has shown unfaithfulness, but God was always faithful and always pleading with his people. And so now we come to chapter 10, and we finally see, we're going to see some practicality, some like, okay, we've talked a lot about wanting to restore uh, restore the proper worship uh, here in Israel. We've built the temple, we rebuilt the walls. Israel has a presence here, and we want to reestablish the worship, and it all looks good. But how do we know that it's going to stay that way? What this is an old song and dance with Israel up to this point. Making a promise, yeah, we'll keep that. And then, yeah, no, they didn't. And yeah, we didn't mean it last time, but we mean it this time. And then no. So here we go, chapter 10, and we're gonna see some stuff happening. Now I'm gonna attempt something, but I something tells me that Fish Sticks is not gonna like this, but we're gonna give it a go. All right. So, oh my gosh, he did it. All right. So I know this is a fun looking one because it's a bunch of names. If you're feeling especially courageous, I will hand this one off. Otherwise, I will take this one because I understand there's a lot of fun stuff in that one. It's not nearly as long as you'd think for 27 verses, but uh, it's not quite as long. It's just fun. Oh, Wise Rat. Dang. Okay. I'll give that man a gold star for being willing to take this. All right. If you need to tap out at any point, I'll go for it. Wise Rat, you are up, sir.
All right, here we go. The people who sealed the covenant. On the seals are the names of Nehemiah the governor, the son of Hakaliah, Zedekiah, Sariah, Azariah, Jeremiah, Pashur, Amariah, Man, people keep typing, and then my thing keeps jumping. Hold on just a second here.
No, you're fine. Trust me, I'm feeling that one. You're at Malchijah.
Malchijah, Hattush, Shebaniah, Malak, Haram, Meremoth, Obadiah, Daniel, Ginnathon, Baruch, Meshullam, Abijah, Mejamin, Maaziah, Bilgai, Shemaiah. These are the priests, and the Levites, Jeshua the son of Azaniah, Binui of the sons of Henadad, Kadmiel, and their brothers Shebaniah, Hodiah, Kelita, Pelaiah, Hanan, Micah, Rehob, Hashabiah, Zakur, Sherebiah, Shabaniah, Hodiah, Bani, Beninu, the chiefs of the people, Parosh, Pahath Moab, Elam, Zatu, Bani, Bunni, Asgad, Bebai, Adonijah, Bigva, Aden, Adder, Hezekiah, Azur, Hodiah, Hashem, Beziah, Hariph, Anathoth, Nabai, Magpisha, Meshullam, Hazir, Meshizabel, Zadok, Jaddua, Pelatiah, Hannah, Ananiah, Hoshea, Hananiah, Hashub, Halohesh, Pilha, Shobek, Rehum, Hashabna, Mysia, Ahiah, Hanan, Anan, Maluk, Haram, and Banah.
Whew. That took some guts to tackle that. Well done.
That was the best I could do.
You did fantastic. All right. Now, I do have to drop this in because when I first read through this passage, I I admittedly got to verse 15 and I chuckled. And this is for someone who's not here. But we don't stop thinking about him. Now, so we start. The very first thing, like not even a verse, this is just the title of this passage. It says, the people who sealed the covenant. What covenant are we talking about? Where did this come from? Oh, Kess was paying attention. Yeah, context. So if you back up one verse, back into chapter 9, verse 38, it says, because of all this, and remember, that's the history lesson that we were just talking about, where Israel's been very unfaithful and God has been completely faithful. Because of all this, we make a firm covenant, there it is, in writing. On the sealed document are the names of our princes, our Levites, and our priests. So you come to verse 10, and how does it, or chapter 10, and how does it lay things out? On the seals are the names of, the rulers, Nehemiah, Zedekiah, who more than likely was this guy named, probably a name for Zadok, who was Nehemiah's secretary. That's more than likely who that is. Then you have all these other guys: Sariah, Azariah, Jeremiah, Pashur, Amariah, Malchijah. All of these guys, through verse 8, these are the priests. Then you pick it up in verse 9. Then you've got the Levites. And then in verse 14, you have the chiefs, or the heads of the households of the remainder of the people. Okay. So this is just the follow-up, the detail-oriented nature of the Jews on display from that one verse in verse 38 of chapter 9. And this is indicative of or something that happened frequently, that the head of the household would, or the head of a family would sign as indication of the rest of the household. Okay? So does that make sense? I know we just blitzed through 27 verses, but that's what I meant in saying that this chapter has a ton of detail. Most of the verses there are like 3 words, but aren't you grateful you have a name like you have? Are you kidding me? Just, that's something we can be thankful for, at least you don't have to go around and could you imagine just being at work and your boss comes over and hey, Miss Isabel, aren't you grateful that you have a name like whatever your name is? So much easier. Anyways, all right. Any questions so far? Okay, nobody's typing. Oh no, Cass is typing. I want to turn out the lights so that you can't see my notes. There are certain individuals that are repeated or are mentioned in other passages, but not in any particular significant way. They're all. This is a list that kind of lines up with other passages. Certain of these men or the households are mentioned in the return with Zerubbabel back in Ezra 2. And so you'll see similar names, but these aren't guys that are like, it's not like you're going to see Shechaniah from the last chapter of Ezra, that guy that I loved. It's not going to be anything significant like this guy appears in another. It's basically, here's the name of the begats and here's the name of the begats. Same guy, but there's no biblical story about them. That's basically what we're dealing with. So no, don't worry about that. Really, the only one that is noteworthy is that Zedekiah or Zadok. That was the one that was pointed out the most in the commentaries I was looking at. All right, cool. So congratulations, guys. We are through 27 verses, and I'm barely 15 minutes into this. Good job. All right. How about the next 2 verses? Anybody want to take these 2? Cass, it's yours if you want it.
All right. The rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, the temple servants, and all who have separated themselves from the peoples of the lands to the law of God, their wives, their sons, their daughters, all who have knowledge and understanding, join with their brothers, their nobles, and enter into a curse and an oath to walk in God's law that was given by Moses the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord, our Lord, and his rules and his statutes.
All right. So if you're paying attention, you're going to see that there's a thing that keeps happening here that happens that we first noticed in Ezra and we're seeing it here in Nehemiah, is that there is a hierarchy that's listed. which is this is free. It's not life changing or anything, but you see, in order, just as it was listed in Nehemiah or in Ezra, you have the priests, then the Levites, then the gatekeepers, the singers, the temple servants, who are the Nethinim. You've heard that word before. But there are a few other additions. You see the rest of the people, which refers to like just the you have the heads of the households in the first 27 verses, and these are all the people who fall under the heads of those households, all the remainders of the people. Then you have these extra little addition here, kind of in the middle of verse 28, all who have separated themselves from the peoples of the land to the law of God. What is that? Are we just like encompassing everybody here? Just in case we missed any of the Jews or what? Okay. So Kez says that we know that there are some people, and this is true. We talked about some of these guys that were allied with Sanballat and oh shoot, now his name escapes me. Darn it. Tobiah. Yes, thank you. Guys who were kind of in league with Tobiah during all of this, and other individuals. So it could be drawing a distinction between that. Some of the commentaries I looked at talked about non-Jewish proselytes to Judaism. And so when it covers all the people, we talk about all the people who work in the temple, then the rest of the Jewish people, and then it adds on this extra little bit, those who have separated themselves from the people of the lands, meaning they have stepped away from maybe the lands of their birth and affixed themselves to the Jewish people because they worship Jehovah God. Now, can't be sure of that, but that seems to be reasonable. Cosine has a question. Yeah, Gentile converts. Exactly. I'm not going to definitively say that's what it is, but there seems a strong likelihood. So verse 29, they join with their brothers, their nobles, the guys that sign the, put their John Hancocks, and enter into a curse. That doesn't sound good. What is this? We're entering into a curse? What is this curse? Okay. You've pretty much got it. So think about what a covenant is here, where, a covenant is an agreement between two parties, in this case, the Israelite people, the Jews, and God himself. God has, being God, has expressed, these are my commandments, keep them. And Israel in the past had said, we will. And initially God had placed a decree, a quote unquote curse, if you will, that if they failed to keep the law, then there would be a penalty, there would be a payment for their failure. And we saw that come to fruition numerous times, kind of in lesser degrees, but gradually building up to the 70-year exile in Babylon. And so now that we see, this revival, the people make a covenant again to keep the law of God, and in order to, not make it binding, but in order to demonstrate their willingness to fulfill the oath, they place a curse or a punishment if they fail to do so. Consider it a sort of incentive to continue in the law. Although that does kind of cheapen it. Maybe that's a bad way of putting it. Just kind of waiting to see what's being typed up here. That's a good way of looking at it, yeah. An expression of sincerity and commitment. It's like, we're going to follow this, and if we fail to do so, then we deserve this curse because of our lack of faith, or our faithlessness in this regard. Just waiting to see what Cosign's got to say here before we move on.
Okay, so my thoughts on this are, I know that when Christ is asked about what is the most important law to follow, he responds by saying that we are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and all your strength. If I missed one of them, I apologize. And then on top of that, to love the neighbor as yourself. And one of the things later on within the same passage, I believe, he mentions again that maybe it's not that passage, but he says that he's come to replace the law rather than
He's come to fulfill it, not abolish it.
Yes, yeah, fulfill it, not to abolish it. And something that comes up in that, at least from what I've been told, is that follows the idea of the Jews were supposed to follow the 613 laws, I think. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Christ says that the law the law condemns, like through the law, you are. Sorry.
That's Romans. That's the book of Romans.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
Mm.
Thank
No,
you,
but
Kevin.
yeah, this is
Oh.
what we're talking about here is not so much a that level of curse. This is or a curse in that regard. This is something that they're basically like, this is our side of the bargain. Our side of the bargain is we're going to keep your commandments. If we don't, then there is this punishment that we claim upon ourselves as, the Bible, Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death.
Yeah.
Kind of that, for failing in this regard, these is the wages, is the payment that we receive for not keeping our end of the bargain. That's basically what we're going for here.
Yeah. But you know which one I'm referencing, right, Scribe? By talking about how the law is meant to hold us accountable, and
Yeah, it's a schoolmaster.
Yeah.
That's another one of the I think that's Galatians.
yeah.
But yeah,
I'm thinking of
that's off topic. So we can swing
Okay.
around to that a little bit later, but that's not. Yeah, that's where we're rabbit trailing with that.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. All right. Can I get someone to read the next verse? Back in Nehemiah. Chess, can you not antagonize the bot?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Nobody wants the one verse. Wise Rat just tackles 27, so I can't blame him. I'll take this one. So, we will not give our daughters to the people of the land or take their daughters for our sons. So the question is why? This should be an easy one. We've covered this a lot. They knew their history. What's that mean? It's a hyperlink actually to a bunch of places, but yes, Judges is definitely one. Yeah. You kind of just imagine that God's up here when they're making this covenant, and part of me, if God were like super sarcastic and not like the most patient being in the ever of ever, be just like, yeah, I've heard this one before. Yeah. So these next the next few verses kind of shows us an idea of the understanding of the Jews in regards to this covenant, that it covers every facet of their lives. And we'll see that this first one shows an understanding of obeying God when it comes to the family. Because we look at it and it's like, yes, the man to the wife, don't go marrying off, go marrying someone who is attached to uh, another religion, another faith, someone who worships Baal or Asherah or whatever god, insert god here. Don't go intermarrying with those people. Okay. And so that sounds, that makes sense. But there's something special about the way that this is phrased. And this happens all throughout the Old Testament, but it's something in our Western mind, especially our modern Western mind, that we often miss. He says, "We will not give our daughters to the people of the land or take their daughters for our sons." If you notice, that's not directed at a groom or a bride. That's directed towards the parents. Because in Eastern culture at that time, it wasn't the choice of the young man or the young woman who they wanted to marry. It was the choice of the parents. If you remember back to the story of Samson, when Samson says, "I want to marry this woman," and the parents are like, "Isn't there anybody among the Israelites you could get?" That's why Samson's story was so unique, because Samson went out and was picking people, but he still had to get his parents' permission. Yeah. And so this is a call out to the parents saying, look out for your kids so that your choices don't ruin what you are making a covenant with this day. You will honor God in obedience when it comes to your family. Okay? Does that make sense? Any questions? That clear as mud, whatever. All right, good, excellent. Ooh. While Kess is typing, does someone want to take verse 31? Kess, start typing again. Maybe someone will pipe up and start reading.
Well, it's just an observation that the Jewish marriage system under the Mosaic Law said basically that once you took a girl as a concubine, she had certain protections and you couldn't just get rid of her. And by marrying them off to foreigners, the girls especially, they were forfeiting those protections for them. That's just interesting.
Yep.
I'm sure it wasn't the main concern, but I think it was a concern.
It kind of why when you look at the end of Ezra and the whole idea of these men putting off all these foreign women, it draws upon that and makes sure that these women were, and their families were taken care of, and the choice of these Jewish men to pursue God over, and to turn their back on their gosh, words aren't working right. To turn away from these foreign women and pursue God, they still had to make provisions for them. Nobody's going to take verse 31. In all of my little rambling there, nobody decided to take it. Oh my goodness. I took the last one. Gosh darn it. All right, I'll take this one too, but no more. If the peoples of the land bring in goods or any grain on the Sabbath day to sell, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or on a holy day. And we will forgo the crops of the 7th year and the exactation of every debt. All right. So the last one was honoring God within the family. What's this one talking about? What's verse 31 all about? All right. So what might be another way of putting that? Actually, that's probably begging the question a bit much. I'm sorry. If verse 30 is honoring God and the family, verse 31 is honoring God in your business or in your finances. Because the fact that this is being made as part of this covenant kind of would insinuate that it's been a problem area, right? It's like, hang on, this is something that we haven't been doing that we have to come out and make a point of not doing it. You know, that old saying, there's a story behind every sign. This is kind of that. Any businessman who's even remotely good at his job will understand that you can make more of a profit generally if you are open and doing business more days out of the week. If you're open 5 days out of the week, if you're open a 6th day, you can probably make more money on that 6th day. And if you're only working 6 days, you can make more money by working 7 days. And some people have been doing that. But because we know that, you're not supposed to be doing work on the Sabbath, they come out and make this covenant. And part of the covenant is that they're not going to have their businesses working on the Sabbath. There was also the idea of the Sabbath year, the year of rest. Every 7th year, debts were to be forgiven by Jewish law, and then there was also the year of Jubilee, which isn't mentioned here, but there was obvious neglect in regards to that as well, and so they make a point of saying, okay, we're going to go back and we are going to reestablish the observance of all these commandments that we have just strictly been ignoring or neglecting. We have put, basically, this whole section is saying we as a people have gotten our eyes off of the pursuit of God, and we are looking now to make a profit. What's the best way to earn some money instead of what is God honoring in or with our money? Okay. So we see family, we see business. Any questions on that point? All right, no typing. All right. Next 3 verses 32 to 34.
I can take this one.
Let's hold off a second.
Oh, pardon.
I want to see if somebody else will take this one. Farmer Gal, it is all yours, ma'am.
We also take on ourselves the obligation to give yearly a third part of a shekel for the service of the house of God, for the showbread, the regular grain offering, the regular burnt offering, the Sabbath, the new moons, the appointed feasts, the holy things, and the sin offerings to make atonement for Israel, and for all the work of the house of our God. We, the priests, the Levites, and the people, will likewise cast lots for the wood offering, to bring it into the house of our God, according to our fathers' houses, at times appointed, year by year, to burn on the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. So verse 30 was about honoring God in the family, and 31 was honoring God in the business. 32 through 34 is honoring God when it comes to his work or in the ministry, such as it was. Because here's the thing. I don't know if you know this, but in our day, in our day and time, churches don't work for free. Did you know that? Churches cost money to stay open. They cost money to actually, pastor got to get paid. I know, it's crazy. And so what this is talking about is it's kind of this natural movement from where we're honoring God with the money that we make or our business opportunities, our finances. And verse 31 moves into 32. It's now what you do with your money. Okay? Now, in the Mosaic Law, there is a setting apart of a certain amount, a certain tax for the funding of then the tabernacle, but the temple, what would become the temple, and that's kind of what we're talking about with this yearly third part of a shekel. A third of a shekel from each person would go to the upkeep of the temple. And there are a lot of things as a part of that. There's the showbread, which was symbolic of the presence of God. Being the bread of life to his people. Kind of hearkening back to the man in the desert. The regular grain offering, the regular burnt offering, the Sabbaths, the new moons, the appointed feasts, the holy things. All of these things which are appointed as to be regular occurrences, these offerings that and the regular work that goes on in the temple. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't look that up. I apologize. How that would have been a really good idea. Translating a shekel into modern modern times. Somebody could probably Google that. How much was a shekel worth in today's in today's currency. Somebody want to do that, I wouldn't be opposed. I was like open sarcasm, Mike, but if you guys can't read a single verse, then I doubt that you'd have the energy to go look that up on Google. And sarcasm. All right. Now you come to verse 34, and they're talking about, casting lots for the wood offering. What is the deal with this? What is going on here?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Verse 34. It says, "We, the priests, the Levites, and the people, have likewise cast lots for the wood offering." Why are we casting lots? What is this all about? Okay. Good observation. It did not grow on temple grounds. No. We do know, we talked about this back in Ezra, and a little bit in Nehemiah, that there were forests and tree groves near Jerusalem on hills nearby. So yeah, now the problem is that, remember, Israel's been back for, back in Jerusalem for around 60, 70 years at this point. That's not terrible, but considering they were gone for 70 years, that's a lot of neglect that's probably happened to these trees. So there's not the forests and such haven't been well tended, and so there's probably not as plentiful time, and various peoples, the pillaging of the land probably reduced a lot of stuff. So there are two camps of thought on what this verse means, and I'm like, well, ¿por qué nos dos? The first thought is that the casting of lots regards to which temple group, the Levites, the priests, the gatekeepers, the singers, the whomever would go out and get the wood. Which, that makes sense. You wouldn't want the same group doing it all the time. So you would cycle around, share the responsibility, as it were. At the same time, if you kept pulling wood from the same place, because according to the Mosaic law, this wood offering was always supposed to be going. It was never supposed to run out. It should always be, it should always be burning. That takes a lot of wood. Who has, even if you owned a ton of land, would you by yourself be able to support basically a flame that never goes out? I'm looking in the chat, and there are two different questions being answered. That's true. As we have fires that go up all around the, at the live nativity. We have fires at each of the stations for the actors to stay warm. And yeah, they go through wood quick. So it's super hard to keep those fires going. Could you imagine an offering fire that is never intended to go out? So the other camp's thought is that they're sharing the responsibility of providing the wood. Where's the wood coming from? So, whose land is being uprooted and the trees are coming from where to fuel this flame? And I'm like, it makes sense that it's both. One group from the temple would carry the responsibility of getting the wood from a particular place when it was their time. All right. So that's my interpretation of what we're talking about here. But again, all of this is being devoted towards, the work that was going on in the temple, because all of this stuff has to come from somewhere. You have you have these sin offerings, you have the regular offerings on behalf of the nation of Israel, the Sabbath offerings, you have the festival or the feast offerings. All of this stuff is part of, I hesitate to use this word, but the routine of the temple. It's what the temple does. Someone has to provide for it. And so in order that the temple could continue fulfilling its designated responsibility to God, the people take this covenant to provide so that the temple and the people who worked in the temple can continue doing their work in service to the Lord. Yeah, very much so, Cass. That kind of leads into this next section as well. But whereas this is, while verses 32 through 34 tended to focus on a special ministry of the Levites, the priests, all these guys, verses 35 through 38 Yeah. Verses 35 through 38 become much more personal. It's not about, those guys who work over in the temple in the building where God hangs out. This now enters into your personal life at home. Okay, this is honoring God within your own life. Now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. So can I get someone to read verses 35 through 38? All right, Cosine, go ahead.
Just checking the verses.
Yep.
We obligate ourselves to bring the first fruits of our ground and the first fruits of all fruit of every tree, year by year, to the house of the Lord. Also to bring to the house of our God, to the priests who minister in the house of our God, the firstborns of our sons and of our cattle, as it is written in the law, and the firstborns of our herds and of our flocks, and to bring the first of our dough and our contributions, the fruit of every tree, the wine and the oil, to the priests, to the chambers of the house of our God, and to bring to the Levites the tithes from our ground. For it is the Levites who collect the tithes in all our towns where we labor. And the priest, the son of Aaron, shall be with the Levites when the Levites receive the tithes. And the Levites shall bring up the tithes of the tithes to the house of God, to house of our God, to the chambers of our storehouse, for the people of Israel.
38, not 39. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. All right. So there's a particular theme that, mention of accountability system. Yep, right at the end. There's a theme that runs through these 4 verses. Anybody notice what it is? There's a word that gets repeated a lot. Yeah, first. You got the first fruits of the ground and the first fruits of all fruit from every tree. You've got the firstborn of the sons, and the firstborn of the cattle, and the first of the herds, and the first of the flocks, and the first of the dough. And oh my goodness, the first of tons of stuff. Yeah. So here's a question. Why is that so significant? Why should it be first? Why does God demand the first? Priorities, good answer. What else? Kess, why did you write trust? What's the trust about?
If you bring in the first fruits of your crop, you're not eating it, and you don't have a guarantee that you will get a second crop. It's a very uncertain life.
Yes. Yup. Notice that God doesn't say, I want the 20th of, whatever. Or whatever number. Because if you never reach that number, all the stuff leading up to that point is already yours. If you don't get there, it's like, oh, well, I'm exempt. No, God says, the first one is mine. You don't get it. That belongs to me because it forces you to trust that I'm going to provide for you beyond what you give me. Which is such a crucial point. Because if you remember back, we were talking about how, the people of Israel had forsaken, had been working on the Sabbath and forsaking the years of rest, to try to make a buck. This idea, yes, absolutely, it's about priorities. Serving God, giving him the first, giving him the best of everything that you've got. But it's also just as much about trusting God, because I will give you what I have and not knowing if there's going to be any more. Especially now where the people of Israel come back, they are still subjugated by a foreign nation. They've got levies, they've got, tribute that they have to pay back, and now you're having to give money to the temple. How do we know that we're going to have enough to provide for a family? You have to trust God. And that becomes just this beautiful picture, when you consider chapter 9, because remember, the whole point of chapter 9 was showing God's faithfulness in contrast to Israel's unfaithfulness. And when you see that they recognize that they have to place their trust in God when it comes to the provision of the first fruits, or the first of their possessions, they're like, okay, God, we trust the faithfulness that you have demonstrated through the centuries. And it really kind of shows that Israel, we talked, when you talked a number of weeks ago, talk about the understanding. It shows that Israel gets it. It's like, I see what God has been, and at this point, I understand that what he's trying to show us is that we can trust him. And I love that. That's so beautiful. And like Kess said, there's this accountability system. When you bring up these first fruits, you're going to bring them to the Levites, not the priests, but the Levites, because they're the ones that collect the tithes in the towns where they labor, not necessarily at Jerusalem. But when they bring them to Jerusalem, the priest, the high priest, will go with the Levites, and then they'll bring everything in, so that there's accountability, so that there's not this temptation to fudge numbers or to take something that doesn't belong to you. All right. Any questions on that part? I know it's after 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock. All right, last verse. Who wants to take this one? And technically, most of this verse should be included with that last passage, but I set it apart because of the very last little bit. Cosine, I'm gonna impose a little bit. You want to take this one since I cut you off at verse 38? Would you be willing to take verse 39?
Sure.
All right, thank you, sir.
Let's see. For the people of Israel and the sons of Levi shall bring the contribution of grain, wine, and oil to the chambers, where the vessels of the sanctuary are, as well as the priests who minister and the gatekeepers and the singers. We will not neglect the house of our God.
All right, so the first part of verse 39 is tied back to the last little bit of the passage, verses 35 through 38. Bringing all the contribution, all this tithe to the chambers, which is kind of this offshoot of the temple. But then after they talk about that, they say, "We will not neglect the house of our God." That's a great summation, because remember, this is a new temple. It's only been around for a few decades, if that. And in that statement, it's almost kind of assumed. You can almost hear him begging the question, did you neglect the house of your God in the past? To which the answer is a very firm, uh-huh. They definitely did. And this time they're like, look, we know we goofed in the past. Let's not make that mistake again. The temple was the central symbol of the worship of God. And neglecting the temple was an indication of a larger issue, which was the personal neglect of God within the individual lives of the people of Israel. And so, in so saying, we're not going to neglect the temple, was also akin to saying we will not neglect the worship of God in our own lives, because the life of a Jewish man was so tied to the temple. All right. That is chapter 10, guys. Any questions or thoughts that you guys have?